It's November 24. Ukraine Media Center confirmed continues its operation. My name is Svetlana Shaparenko, and now we will be talking about the budget of Ukraine during the war. How do we end this year, and what are expectations for the next year? Joining us online is Serhii Marchenko, the Minister of Finance of Ukraine. Good afternoon, Mr. Serhii. Good afternoon. So, Mr. Serhii, how do we end this year? To what extent the results of this year correspond with the expectations and the forecasts for the end of this year? Well, we end this year quite in a stable manner. We have certain uncertainty regarding the aid from the United States. The Congress is reviewing this issue. I think that the decision will be taken shortly. However, we have understanding of how do we fund our priority expenses, specifically security and defense sector, then pensions, social expenses, salaries of teachers and medics. We have understanding how do we close this difficult year, and I hope that all of the measures that were planned will be taken to the full extent. Well, the level of GDP, the level of inflation that were forecasted a year ago, for what I understand, the situation is better than the forecast. So what did help us to stabilize those indicators? Well, you know, we better don't evaluate the macroeconomic indicators in a linear manner. Yes, we achieved the decrease of inflation from 26 to 6 and to 5% this year, but at the same time, the currency exchange rate has strengthened. So-called managed flexibility mode was imposed, but from the point of view of the budget, we evaluate the macroeconomic indicators in a little bit different way. Stable hryvnia strengthening the way it influences our income. The situation may be a little bit different here. This is why we evaluate the macroeconomic indicators just as they are. We don't influence the macroeconomic situation, the macroeconomic forecast. We, as a Ministry of Finance, as an authority responsible for formulating the budget policy, we just cope with the existing reality and we work with the existing indicators. Budget for the year 2024, to what extent it corresponds with the needs of the state and the funds allocated for the defense of the country, are they sufficient? Well, we covered all the priority areas. First of all, the defense sector, then initiation of new projects in the area of preparation to manufacturing of drones, manufacturing of other types of weapons. Those are the top priorities. Then, as I mentioned, the social expenses. And in response to a question whether the funds allocated for defense sector are sufficient, well, during the war they are never sufficient, but can we provide more? We collected all the taxes and we forwarded to the defense sector. Everything that we were able to borrow in the internal market was channeled at the defense sector as well. So it's the top level of our capabilities for the time being. We have to realize it. This is why we stand for the rational use of resources in the sector of defense. This is the key pressing issue now, and we will be interested in receiving the maximum result from the resources that we have. Well, talking about the resources, tax administration and customs are the most important bodies in replenishing the budget. What will be their role next year? How did they work this year? And what can be done to improve the efficiency of those bodies? Well, this year we expect the tax administration to fulfill the forecasted plan the customs is catching up with the indicators that resulted from the difference in currency exchange rate. You know, the rate part significantly influenced the proceeds from the customs, but they demonstrate pretty good results within the next couple of months. I think that even if they don't catch up fully, they will catch up pretty significantly. Also, in cooperation with the International Monetary Fund, we expect to increase our income parts. We prepare the strategy of government proceeds until the year 2030 that will include the administrative measures, the measures of formulating policies, and reinforcement of such bodies as tax administration and customs, their staffing with professionals, digitalization of processes, implementation of risk-oriented approaches, and implementation of European legislation. In fact, we will replace our administrations, our agencies, with the ones that work in accordance with European standards. We've done a lot in this area, and we still have to adapt our tax administrations so it works in compliance with the legislation of the European Union. To what extent Ukraine will continue being dependent on the international support, and what programs do we expect to be implemented in this area next year? Well, we are very dependent on the external aid. This dependency is measured at the level of 41 billion United States dollars. Next year, it includes the support by the International Monetary Fund. We expect for the aid from European Union. There are negotiations to establish a 3-year program for Ukraine, and we also hope for the aid from the United States. We have understanding that there will be aid provided by the government of Japan, by the government of Great Britain. We are also in negotiations with the government of South Korea, with the government of Canada, and other countries of G7 to create a necessary pool, because it's one of the pressing issues for the time being to provide country with an opportunity to get a stable situation in the area of finance, stable macroeconomic environment, and it also creates grounds for our armed forces to fulfill their job properly. What are the requirements set by our international partners to have this aid continuing? Well, I wouldn't say there are certain requirements set for us, but I would say that in coordination with our key partners, we work on the key reforms that are supposed to be implemented shortly and within the medium-term perspective to, first of all, reinforce the institutional capacity of the government, ensure eradication of corruption, ensure proper operation of the local governments, to ensure the implementation of judicial reform, and to create the safe environment in which we can expect for the investments to come that will be protected by the law. So do you see any risks of decrease of aid coming from different countries due to some political changes in those countries? And if so, what are those risks and how they can be of threat to us? Well, the risks were always there, and please don't underestimate them, but every single of those risks should be worked with, because behind any delay of aid or suspension of aid to Ukraine, there are specific people, specific political forces and either in coordination with the partners or individually we have all capabilities to work with every specific risk to build the relevant political and diplomatic infrastructure that would allow us of minimizing those risks. We were making it within the last couple of years, and I think that we will be able to achieve consensus within the next year and further on. Well, financial aid is coming to Ukraine in huge amounts, really. Part of that aid is not supposed to be repaid, and part of it we will have to repay sooner or later. Do we have understanding any roadmaps of how we are going to do that? You know, given the fact that the majority of loans that we're getting, I'm not talking about the grants, we have a lot of grants now, so those loans that we raise, we get them at under preferential conditions, and they are of long-term nature. The term of repayment varies from 15 to 30 years. For example, European Union loans are 30 years maturities. So thinking now about repayment of debts within 30 years is not worth it. By that time, I hope we will be a country capable of repaying all those loans quite efficiently. We will be a developed European countries that would be able to normally service that war debts that were borrowed recently. Well, and to wrap it up, what is the financial situation that we expect during the year 2024? Well, we should expect the situation to be stable, but it all depends on our capabilities to raise financial support, and it will also depend on the situation in the front lines, because a lot depends on the situation in the battlefield. It defines the nature of all relations within the state, and we have to build all of our forecast based on the situation in the battlefield, on the development of our military campaign. This is why, even given the unchanged approach, the situation from the point of view of finance will be fully covered, and I hope our partners will find a solution to support Ukraine in year 2024. And what are the priorities that Ministry of Finance identified for itself for the year 2024? The priority is obvious: to cover the basic needs of the state, to ensure the funding of necessary expense articles, to ensure the proper operation of customs and tax administrations. By proper operation, I mean relevant replenishment of the respective articles of budget, and in coordination with business to implement risk-oriented approach and not to create obstacles for development of businesses, but otherwise to create conditions for bringing more investments to Ukraine. So first we need to raise proper resources within and outside the country, and then we have to make sure that all those steps that were contemplated during development of the budget would be implemented to the full extent. Do we have any questions on the floor? Vladislav Obuch, Ukrinform. 2 questions. First question regarding the national strategy of government proceeds. Is there any understanding whether it will be approved by the end of this year or within the next financial year? And another question is whether we have a clear understanding about what to do with the previously restructured debts in securities under which Ukraine has to start repayment after the August next year. Are there any chances that this restructuring will be prolonged with our commercial lenders? Well, in response to your first question, The draft strategy is already developed. It will be presented to the government. It was already presented to the government, and I hope that the government will support the strategy of expenses, which will become a roadmap that we can implement shortly. Well, talking about the cooperation with commercial lenders, we have a couple of tasks to fulfill. Before that, first of all, it's clear that we have a lot of uncertainties and we cannot say what the situation will be next year, in year 2025, and it identifies the nature of our cooperation with the investors. On top of that, we want to preserve the capability of access to the capital markets. It's important for the post-war recovery. This is why all of our steps and actions will be thoroughly calculated with account of the interest of the state of Ukraine. Thank you very much, Mr. Serhii, for your detailed answers. Joining us online was Serhii Marchenko, the Minister of Finance of Ukraine, and Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum is coming back on at 1400, and we will talk about the gender-based violence. Stay tuned. Thank you.